Greetings. Thank you all for joining us to celebrate the winners of the Michael Elliott Award for Excellence in African Storytelling and to have an important and timely discussion about the current state of journalism in Africa. Today's event is organized by the International Center for Journalists, One Campaign, and by the Elliott family. We're live streaming this event on ICFJ's Facebook page, and the recording of this event will be available on ICFJ's YouTube channel afterwards. When we move on to the discussion about the current state of journalism and the challenges women journalists face in Africa, we encourage our audience to participate by posting questions in the Q&A, in the chat, or in the comments of the Facebook live stream. Now, without further ado, let me introduce Joyce Barnathan, who this month retired after serving as the president of ICFJ for 15 years and who has been with the Michael Elliott Award from its very inception. It is only fitting that she recognizes the 2020 and 2021 winners of the award. Joyce, over to you.
Thank you, Cher. I'm welcome everybody as we recognize some amazing journalists of the 2020 and 2021 Michael Elliott Award winners. And that will be followed by a very terrific discussion led by another amazing women journalist, Catherine Gicheru. But first, I want to say a few words about this award. Michael Elliott was truly an outstanding journalist, a philanthropy leader, and he was also a member for 8 years on the board of the International Center for Journalists. So I had the privilege of knowing Mike from my days as an international correspondent to our extremely close work together when he was on the board of directors. And after he left journalism, Mike became the executive director of ONE, the global movement to end extreme poverty. This award, which was established by ICFJ ONE and his wife, Emma Oxford, and the Elliott family, is not only a tribute to a talented journalist, but to a great human being. And before Mike passed away all too soon, he had mentioned to some people that he'd love to establish an award for African journalists who are doing outstanding work covering key issues facing the continent, an award that would combine his passion for journalism and for Africa. Mike had the reputation of being a terrific editor and a great storyteller. As many of you know, he worked for The Economist, he worked for Newsweek and Time before going to ONE. And he was a great storyteller in person too. I often asked him to speak at our events where he would talk with great intelligence and insights about global issues. I really do miss him. And we were determined to honor Mike's legacy with this award for excellence in African storytelling. And over the years, over 5 years, this award, in my view, has singled out journalists who tell stories that matter with the same insight and the same intelligence that Mike championed. We receive hundreds of applications each year, hundreds. And a selection committee has the hard job of picking a winner among the finalists. We hope that this award bestows prestige upon the recipient and encourages that person to continue to tell great stories that have impact in Africa. I've been a judge from the beginning. And the women being honored today, I can attest that they are truly standouts. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our award winners for 2020 and 2021. Of course, my doorbell rings when this happens. Let me start with Kiki Mordi, a Nigerian journalist who won the Michael Elliott Award for 2020 for revealing sexual harassment of students at universities in Nigeria and Ghana. She and a BBC team produced a terrific documentary called Sex for Grades, and it ran on the BBC African Eye in October of 2019. There were so many amazing things in this documentary, in my view, but part of it, she went undercover to tell some of the stories, which was truly amazing. And she also told her personal story that I think added to the intensity of the documentary. And the story had tremendous impact. Following a 9-month investigation by her and her team, several lecturers were suspended. Sex for Grades attracted worldwide attention and has been viewed, listen to this, nearly 9 million times on YouTube. 9 million times on YouTube. Kiki and her team were nominated for a 2020 International Emmy and were part of the feminist coalition that won the 2020 People Journalism Prize for Africa. So congratulations, Kiki. The 2021 winners are Zainab Bala of Nigeria and Bernadette Vivuia from the Congo. Zainab produced a documentary called The Almagidi. And I have to say it was a gripping documentary, and it focused on children in Northern Africa who left their homes for Islamic education in the nation's capital, where they were neglected and abused by their religious teachers. In graphic footage, she showed how some children were restrained in chains and others were forced to beg for food. The documentary was not only eye-opening for viewers, but at the end of the documentary, even her team talks about how eye-opening it was for the Nigerians who made this amazing documentary that I have to say is extremely painful to watch. So congratulations, Zainab. And we'll hear from all these women in the panel discussion. And last but not least is Bernadette, who focused on children in the Congo who toiled in mines that produced raw materials used in making capacitors for electronic devices. This story was published by Equal Times, and it showed how these children facing crushing poverty were forced into such backbreaking work, and basically showed how we're just not meeting the global goal of ending child labor. Bernadette, I believe, is our first winner also from Francophone Africa. So congratulations to you, Bernadette, for an outstanding story. And I have to say, another heartbreaker when you think of what these children were going through. Each winner receives a cash prize of $5,000 and a 2-week customized online program that ICFJ designs along with The Economist, and this year with AJ Plus English. Now, normally in normal times when we don't have a pandemic, we bring our participants to newsrooms in the US and in Great Britain, but we have not been able to do that for the past 2 years. That said, we have designed, I think, very great online programs so that our winners can get immersed in certain departments that they're most interested at these various news organizations. They have access to editorial meetings and engagement with specific editors or producers. Also, after their program, they each receive a $1,000 reporting grant to pursue additional high-impact stories in their countries. So I'd like to congratulate them all. You are truly great journalists. I hope you keep doing fabulous work. I say that as a woman journalist who covered a lot of global issues. I'm in awe of the terrific work that you did. And now I'm going to turn it over to author Emma Oxford, Mike's wife, to say a few words.
Thank you, Joyce. I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panel, but first I'd really like to express my thanks to Joyce and wish her well in the next phase of her life. I'm sure a lot of travel will be on the agenda for you, and also being a grandmother and no doubt more exciting things. But from the outset, Joyce took a leadership role in launching the Michael Elliott Award, and more than anyone, she has ensured the success of the program in its first 5 years. As Joyce said, she and Mike knew each other for over 20 years. They first met when Joyce was on assignment in Hong Kong, and Mike was the editor of Newsweek International. And I'm sure Mike was impressed by Joyce's deep knowledge of both Asia and of Russia. She held degrees in Russian, Chinese, and Asian studies, and had already completed a stint in Moscow. And then Joyce's husband, Steve Strasser, became a close colleague of Mike's at Newsweek. So Mike was delighted when Joyce became president of ICFJ in 2006, and especially when she invited him to join the board. He thoroughly enjoyed his 8 years of service on the board, remaining on it after he had actually left journalism to head up the One campaign. As Joyce has said, Mike dreamt of an Africa Journalism Fellowship, and I know that he saw ICFJ as a natural host organization, but he couldn't have known that Joyce would take up the idea with unbridled enthusiasm, and I was very touched when she did so. So thank you, Joyce, for personally championing the Michael Elliott Award from its inception. You led the design of the program in consultation with our family, with Mike's journalism friends and mentors, and with his colleagues at One. Together, we managed an intensive fundraising campaign, and were able to launch the first award competition in late 2016. Now, 5 years on, Joyce's vision and her steady leadership has helped to expand the program and to cement its reputation for providing terrific opportunities for early career journalists in Africa. Joyce, I will always value your wisdom, your unflappable nature, your thoughtful work as a fellowship judge, and your friendship. I am very glad that your successor, Sharon Mishavi, is with us today, and I look forward to working with you, Sharon. I'd also just briefly like to thank all of the program supporters, who include family members, friends, co-workers of Mike, and board members of One and of ICFJ. It's your generous gifts that have helped us to promote groundbreaking journalism in Africa. I'm grateful to The Economist, Mike's first employer in the media, for making it possible to expand the program this year, and to the many other media organizations who host and support our fellows. I'm also very grateful to the team at ICFJ and to our distinguished international panel of judges. This was led for 4 years by Norman Perlstein and now by Lionel Barber. The judges take enormous care with the selection process, and we spend a good deal of time reviewing the finalists out of the hundreds of original applicants. And I believe we've most years almost unanimously picked some outstanding winners, such as our 20 and 21 winners, who you will be meeting in our discussion today. So I congratulate each of you very warmly, Kiki, Zainab, and Bernadette. And Catherine Gicheru, who will moderate the discussion, is one of Africa's foremost editors. She is also a valued member of the panel of judges for this award. Catherine is an ICFJ Knight Fellow and the director of the Africa Women Journalism Project, which is a collaboration of women journalists committed to driving coverage of underreported gender, health, and development issues that affect women and other marginalized groups. Catherine, thank you so much for leading this discussion, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Emma, Joyce, and Sharon, and welcome Kiki, Zainab, and Betty. I've been looking forward to having this conversation, because for me, it's not really a discussion, it's a conversation with young women journalists who for me, they kind of, you're an inspiration, because at least I know we are in good hands if you have people like you in the profession. Let me just set a kind of a, I don't want to call it bring the mood down, but really just talk about the status of journalism and women journalists in Africa. I don't know how many of you have looked at it, but the recent GMMP, Global Media Monitoring Program report, which was released early this year, kind of painted a very gloomy picture about women journalists and media in Africa and our place in it, the place of women journalists. The thing which really kind of killed me was that, first of all, it noted that in the last 6 years, from 2015 till now, the number of women in the newsroom has gone down. And that is really a kind of a backward movement. The other thing which I thought was really kind of depressing, and I don't want us all to be depressed, but it kind of, I want us to take it and use it to move our struggle forward, because I think it is a struggle all of us have to be there, is that in terms of who is being quoted, we haven't changed in the last 15 years. And by the way, it's not only in Africa, it's globally. The number of women who are being quoted, or the number of women who are sources, or the number of women who are being reported as experts or being cited as experts has not changed a million since 2005. So you know we have a struggle ahead of us. Today, I'm really, really happy though, because I have those 3 young women to have a conversation with, because I think they are the future. For me, we're handing over the baton to people like Bernadette and Zainab. And I think and others who are in this, who are participating in this conversation. And I really wanted to say that despite the difficult circumstances that we find ourselves in, I mean, women journalists find themselves in Africa and the rest of the world, we have to continue. So today I wanted to start off by, first of all, understanding from each of you, Emma, Zainab, and Betty. I mean, the recognition you've got from the Michael Elliott Award is just one instance, and I hope you're going to go for more. But maybe you can tell us, and I'll start with Zainab, maybe you can tell us what drove you to do the Almagidi story and the other stories that you've been doing, because you've been doing a lot on social issues. So what actually got you, what beat you to to do the Almagidi story?
Hello, everybody.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
You can, Zainab, go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be given this award, this prestigious award among hundreds of people who submitted their entries. So basically, 2 things made me do the Almagidi story. One is I wanted to change perception. A perception where it is known that in Nigeria, Almagidi children come from an Islamic background, and everybody thinks when you see an Almagidi child, this is from an Islamic background, but it is not so, because Islam has created an avenue where a child is supposed to thrive. The Almagidi system also provides an enabling environment for a child to learn. An Almagidi school is supposed to have a very comfortable accommodation. There's supposed to be food. There's supposed to be teachers who can be able to reach out to the students to enable them learn better, but it is not so. I wanted to change that perception, which is why I had an Islamic cleric who spoke about how the Almagidi school is supposed to be like. But unfortunately, it is not so here in Nigeria. And the other thing that led me to do that story was I wanted to draw the attention of authorities. I wanted to draw the attention of stakeholders to this phenomenon, because it has been lingering for years. there has been moves by Nigeria's House of Representatives to inculcate the Almagidi system into the Universal Basic Education Program. But unfortunately, it has not gone that way. So basically, these are the two reasons why I did that story. And I think
Hello? Hello? Okay, maybe we can go to Kiki. I know you dealt with an issue which is really, which has, I think it's not only resonated across the globe, but it was something that was really personal. Was it the idea of going ahead and exposing the sex for grades? What was it because of what happened to you? And what does that say in terms of how we look, how when we as women journalists look at issues, what is it that we bring to the table, which is different from what other journalists may have seen? Because I imagine the problem has been there for a long time. What kind of got you there? Is it the personal thing that happened, the fact that it happened to you personally, or what actually kind of drove you to do it? Because I know many men have seen the story and maybe they overlooked it.
Honestly, it's just like you said, it's everywhere. You throw a stone and wherever it lands, you find an issue of sex for grades, especially in my community. The journey of female journalists in Nigeria is checkered because you don't get to do the stories that you want until, you know, an opportunity falls into, or until maybe you grow big enough to start telling your own stories and start funding your own ideas, or until someone really extends a hand and gives you an opportunity. And that was it for me. I mean, ever since I experienced that as a broadcast journalist, as a print journalist, I had tried to, as much as possible, incorporate the conversation of sexual harassment in universities. Sometimes it's shut down, sometimes it doesn't get as much traction as it should because it wasn't, you know, as in-depth as Sex for Grades was. But then that opportunity presented itself. And I mean, this is a situation of where you're always prepared for something, and then it's like the opportunity presents itself, you don't blink twice, you take it immediately. And it was hard, you know, getting that aspect of telling my own story. I told my story for the first time inside one of the offices in the BBC, and I was wondering if I was going to be able to be brave enough to let my story be spread out to the world. It was no longer, you know, a personal thing that I'd been carrying for a very long time. It was something that was going to be spread to the world. But then I took that leap of faith, and I was hoping that maybe this is, in some ways, maybe this is the healing that I would finally get for the thing that I've been carrying for a very long time. And I was, you know, I was really glad that I was able to do this, use my profession to actually, you know, be there for someone like me, a 19-year-old version of myself who had no one there for them, who had no sense of community, or who had no sense of support from any existing structure whatsoever. So it was a little bit of both. It was definitely because I was passionate about this, but that passion came from, unfortunately, a very dark place where I personally experienced the sexual harassment myself.
I mean, that's the idea that that is the personal thing that happened. What happened to you kind of drove you and pushed you and kept you going. And you actually then went ahead and, like you say, opportunity presented itself and you did not blink twice. Bernadette, I call you Betty. I don't call you Bernadette. Betty, I mean, the whole thing about children and minds, that's a story somebody will say has been told 15 million times and in many different ways. But you, in your story, you kind of brought you actually kind of put me, the way you painted it, I use the word painted it because I could see the images as through your writing. What made you actually go and say, I'm going to do this story? I know it's been done before, but I'm going to do it. What made you say, I'm going to bring what is it that made you think that you could bring something fresh and new? Because you actually did. What drove you? What motivated you to do it? Because I've been looking at other work you've been doing, and again, it's a social issue, but you kind of bring a very weighty, if you want to call it, weighty, or you contextualize it, or you bring in the nuances, including what we call very difficult subjects of finances and who is doing what to whom, the multinationals and all the rest of it, and the contracting. But it was you entered that story from a very social, what we call a social space, which is looking at the life of these young children. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what kind of made you say, I'm going to do this story and this is how I'm going to do it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Firstly, my English is not my first language, but I'll try. As you know, the DRC is one of the poorest countries in the world. But if you look at it more closely, it's more complicated. And the country is potentially rich, I can say very rich, according to its minerals. And this has been true for many years, but it has become even more since the widespread use of IT tools, which require many of the minerals found in our subsoil. And the DRC is therefore not a poor country, but a country where the population lives in the poverty. So the problem of the Congo is to offer opportunities to all its inhabitants and to have a policy of redistribution of richness that allows everyone to take charge of their own lives. And as a Congolese woman, this made me very angry. And it was therefore quite natural that I wanted to cover these issues. And in all my work, I'm very interested on that questions that are related to the resilience of my community. And despite all of problems we can have in the country, how we survive in this area. And it's important to highlight those efforts of local population and their local initiative to try to put end of this situation. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things which kind of struck me with all your stories, and plus all the body of work you guys have been doing is, and a lot of what, even looking at what the GMMP is saying and what various other surveys has shown, is that women tend to do what we call the social issues, which they use the word social issues derogatory, because I don't believe that it should be. It's as if we are less of a human race, less than a proper journalist when you report on social issues. But I wanted to find out from you, all of you, because is investigative reporting, or is it political reporting, or is business reporting a taboo subject for women journalists? Because there are very few of us in those spaces, and the few who are there, like yourselves, because there's elements of investigations, even though you're quote unquote writing a social issue, you did investigate, all of you did investigations, but somebody will take a step back and say, you're just reporting on social issues, but you've incorporated all these elements. I just wanted to get your thoughts on this kind of perception that women, for women journalists, investigations, business, sports sometimes, and politics is for men. It's not for us. Is it a taboo subject for us? Why is it that few of us are in those spaces, and what can we do about that? Maybe you can start off, Zainab. I mean, you go the same, or whoever. By the way, if you think she's not saying what she thinks, you can actually interrupt. Yes, Zainab.
Okay, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I think first off, women are more inclined to do social issues because we have, we are naturally built, to connect emotionally to issues that affect humanity. That's one thing. And a lot of people have actually said that, well, we have quite a number of women journalists doing political issues, business, and all of that. But because of our nature.
Oh, okay. There's a problem with her connectivity. Kiki, would you want to comment on what she's saying? That we're basically nurturing the women as nurturers, so therefore we tend to gravitate towards social issues. What do you think about that?
I wouldn't say nature. I would say, I mean, it's what we've been groomed into in this society. I mean, if you look at the homes, it's not like women have a manual when we are born, a manual of taking care of the home, but somehow it seems to be our job. And what are we going to do except take up the mantle? And so that's what it's sort of replicated in journalism. I remember listening to a mentor of mine speak and talk about there is no gender in the newsroom. And while that is true, and I wish that was just an ideal world, but the truth is, when you go to a typical Nigerian newsroom, when I walk in, looking the way that I look, they'll probably put me in the fashion department, and then put another man in the main thing, the meat, which is the politics. It's not like fashion fashion is definitely, relevant, but it's just disingenuous to try to sort us according to gender and according like niche.
I'm thinking here, but even the kind of stories you guys are doing, you're essentially challenging that perception. And the fact that newsrooms are quote unquote, that's the way the newsrooms are. How do we make those changes? How do we make them see that when I see Kiki, even the way you are right now, I don't see fashion. I see an investigative reporter. I see a sports writer. I see a business writer. I see something which is quote unquote different from what we've been socialized. Because I think I'm not discounting the reality that yes, what our society looks like and what happens in the newsroom is reflective of that. But we're in these spaces to try and change attitudes, like you did with your Sex for Grade story. 9 million views. Those people are not just looking because they are looking for salacious information, maybe a small percentage. But really, the idea here is you actually touched a lot of people because they could see themselves or they could relate to what you're talking about. So really, how do we get women journalists in the newsroom to be seen beyond? Or is it ourselves who are pulling us back, or is it how can we change the newsroom attitude towards women journalists?
It's everyone's job, really. I would say that, we try, when you say like I broke the narrative, I have a male colleague who's also an investigative journalist, and we've worked on, the same techniques using investigations, going undercover. But I know that in spaces, he's still seen as mainstream. And even while what I did shouldn't be like a niche, somehow people still try to push me into that like corner, into a box. Oh, when it's time for anything,
you're being pigeonholed.
Yes. Then every other thing, we go to her male counterpart, and I've seen it play out real time in 2021. But like, while we're working like 5 steps forward, we expect that 2 steps backward, and that those 2 steps, exist in culture because it's the way of life of our community. But it's just this reinforcement, as Chimamanda says, when we are used to a single story, we try to define it by that single story. We need to diversify the stories, and it is everyone's job. It's not just women. The men have to start to normalize women journalists in sports, in business and politics, in investigative journalism. And when we make it out of that bubble, I think we have a duty to just throw the ladder back down and get more women out. Mentor, like personally, I have a number of female journalists that I mentor, and I let them let their wings spread, because I know all the things that limited me when I was still in local journalism, and I don't want that to happen to them. And so I let them explore, and even if it's the same fashion, I just let it be their choice. Let it not be because I bestowed on them. This is what you are. This is who you are. This is the box I'll put you in.
Yeah, that's great. Getting to mentor young journalists, that I think is one way of changing people's attitudes, but also being able to kind of support them so that they are not pigeonholed. Bernadette, you've been able to do some outstanding work on your own and I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you. What has kept you going? Because we know we are not supposed to be doing certain stories, but you've been doing them. What is it that has been keeping you there? And why is it that we still in 2021, we're still struggling with what I was struggling with in 1980 when I started out? I mean, what is it that we need to do? What is it we haven't done? And what is it we need to do to be able to change perception? It's everybody's job, yes, but what can we as women journalists do? Bernadette, what are your thoughts?
My thought is to do very well our job and to feel that we are responsible of the image of our countries that we disseminate in the world. So we have to be careful and and when we treat an issue, to see how we can get a more complex image of the reality here in the country, because of when we treat only one side of a problem or an issue, it's feel that like it was the only image of the country. For example, particularly in Congo, there was many reportages which talk about the war and violence here, but Congo is more than violence or the war. We can still live here in the country, so we can have people who dream, people who fight against those atrocities, and it's more important to highlight those efforts. So it can, in that way, we can arrive to change the perception, even the narrative of around the country and our lives.
That's interesting. It just segues into what we were going to, I mean, the idea of how do we change the narrative about not only our countries, but also about ourselves as women in Africa.
Right.
How do we as journalists, what can we as women journalists do so that we start changing, we change the perceptions, we change the attitudes, we change the narrative that we can only do certain things. We can only report health. And by the way, now every man has taken over health because of the pandemic. So the women have been sidelined yet again, because health is the biggest story of the day. So again, we are not really, even though we make about 43% of the people reporting on health in the continent, women journalists report on health. We are not being seen now during the pandemic. How do we as women journalists change that narrative? How do we take it back? Or I want to call it taking it back because it always belonged to us. It was taken away from us. So how do we as women journalists take it back so that we are front center and position ourselves for what we are? Powerful voices. Well, whatever it is that we're discussing has to be given the same kind of weight as the politics, whatever it is. We need to be allowed to be part of those spaces. But how can we as women journalists change narratives? Zainab, I know you had, when we had this conversation earlier, you were very passionate about the issues. So maybe you can tell us what it is that you had in mind, how we can go about changing the narrative.
Okay. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Zainab,
Can
continue.
you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hello, continue, Zainab. We can hear you.
Okay. I think women journalists have been working hard for quite some time with recent but I think to change the narrative, we need to explore. We need to have somebody we look up to. We need to carve a niche for ourselves because everything has been reported. But finding new angles and finding new ways to tell this story can make a difference. So finding a niche for yourself in the midst of everything that has been reported, I think we need angles for that. Can make a difference. And we need to explore resources as well. We need to continue to learn. We need to continue to learn. We need to explore resources. I think that's the only way we can bring something different to the table.
So, okay, I'm so sorry, but your sound was a bit off. Okay, maybe you can just let us know. I'm not sure whether everybody heard what she said and can help me because I wasn't able to understand. I couldn't hear properly.
I got the part that I got was you need to continue to learn. And she talks about carving a niche for ourselves,
Yeah.
in the space. I mean, you just have to put in the work. There's nothing that we can do about that.
Yeah, okay. For me, one of the things I was thinking about and some of the stuff we had discussed earlier was also the fact that, for example, like now everybody knows Kiki. Everybody knows Betty. Everybody knows Zainab, even if you didn't want to be known. Reason because of awards like this one. So when you do speak, you actually have a bigger platform than maybe the small corner you thought you had. Because 9 million people know Kiki Modi. So if the next thing you do, okay, I'm sorry, no pressure on you, but I think those kind of awards, I do believe they do help. I think it's one way of actually creating or giving or amplifying or helping us create niches or create, not actually niches, but actually being able not only to learn, but also giving us a new platform to continue pushing because now people look up to you, Kiki, people look up to you, Zainab. The people you're mentoring, Betty or Kiki or Zainab, they know that you have you have opened the way and there's no way you're going to walk back, not those 2 steps backwards. You're not going backwards, you're going forward. Because I think that's the whole idea about this kind of, awards, which I have seen have given women journalists platforms. I'm just thinking in terms of where we are at in Africa and recognizing the need to change the narrative, which Zainab was talking about and which you have mentioned, Kiki. What else can we do as women journalists collectively in the continent, if it's possible, to be able to push this so that we can give women that kind of platform or create a platform where when we speak, we're heard? Yeah. Because
Okay.
one of the things which I thought was quite disconcerting, and I can look in Kenya, for example, where we have very few women who are in any positions of authority in the newsroom. So we have that number, and the problem has always been, how do we keep women? How do we stay in the newsroom? Bernadette, how do we keep women, young women journalists in the newsroom long enough to grow into the positions of authority? Am I going to lose you in 2 years' time, Kiki, because how do we keep the women in? How do we let them grow? How can we grow them in the newsroom? Any thoughts from any of you?
Okay, I can just speak to that a little bit because I know the importance of having more women, like not being alone in the newsroom. It's a collective effort, but this question is directed to us as women journalists, what we can do. We can just recognize our strengths. Again, thanks to platforms like this that legitimize us and just like increase our reach. And that reach is very important. As a journalist, when you're writing, people need to read your writing. You're speaking, people need to listen to you speak. And so once you have, once you have that platform, it might not be strong enough alone, but you can, link yourself with other women who have similar platform in different spaces and complement each other, come together, form a coalition that is strong enough to compete at least. And then as a coalition, you're stronger. You have more influence. You have more influence in the newsroom. You know, we have data scientists that are women that are trying to figure out why women fall off, and they have the answers. And what we can do is we can pick up from where those people stopped and say, okay, so how can we help them? So if we know that more and more women, are facing sexual harassment, that's why they fall off after 10 years. Okay, how can we address that issue? How can we, enforce a sexual harassment policy in newsrooms? How can we use our leverage, our influence to make sure that we put pressure on newsrooms across the country to make sure that there is a very, very inclusive sexual harassment policy? It could be, sometimes it's from the home. Right, the problem is from the home. Like women, journalism is too tedious a task, and if you're in an African society, a woman has another unpaid job at home, which she needs to attend to, that will prevent her from earning as a journalist. And so, the first step, I think, is identifying the problem. And when you, as an influential female journalist, join hands together with other influential female journalists, we're able to solve for these problems. We're able to, donate our small money, bring it together, and invest in other female journalists.
I'm just wondering, we can do all that. My problem is, not really my problem. My concern is that we can do all that because we're already doing that. You know that you're doing it in all small spaces. Everybody is trying to kind of network, build this kind of collaborations with other women journalists. But wouldn't it help, or would it be better if we had women in these positions of authority?
For sure.
Because having women as senior editors definitely would mean that
we need them to rise up the ladder. We need them to stay in long enough to be able to rise up the ladder and become a senior, editor. And that, there is a woman that has your back. And so if you're having, if you have any issues, any women-specific issues, best believe that a woman or an editor who has the same context will be able to empathize a little bit more towards you and what you're going through,
Let me ask Zainab a question, because I know like you say, what happens off at our families and whatnot, but in terms of the editor you were reporting to, your editor, how much support did you get? And do you think it would have been any different if it was a woman who was your editor? And how can we get women into these positions of authority? That's the challenge. How can we get women to stay long enough to become decision makers in the newsroom? Bernadette, Zainab? Yep. Zainab or Bernadette, either of you can respond to that.
If I understand, do you mean what can we do to get more women at the resolution?
Yeah. Okay. We say that we've said that getting women in positions of authority or becoming editors is crucial to making sure we get our voices heard. How do we keep the women who are in the newsroom long enough to grow into those positions of authority? Zainab's question I wanted to find out is, would your editors be willing, or were they supportive enough in your story? And do you think it would have been different if it was male? If it was a woman editor?
Okay.
So
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. To be honest, my editors are all males, and then they gave me all the support I needed. And I think for the question, if it had been a woman being my editor, the story would have actually been different, because the women do not support women. And I think if we can change that perception, support more women, I think that will go a long way in giving women the opportunity and the chance, to be in those positions longer.
Oh, that's interesting. I tend to disagree. I would disagree, but I'm not. I think there's a big problem here where we tend to fit in into this where people disparage the women supporting other women, and they tend to take it as a given. And yet when it's similar, when there's a guy who's not really supportive and it's another guy, it never gets pointed out. So I do think it depends on the degree. But I just wanted to hear from you. Would your news managers be willing to appoint women into top position, promote a woman? Kiki, would your manager or your news editor or the owner of the newspaper go out of his way to look for a woman to appoint? Because I think that's one of the biggest challenge where we don't have.
That is one of the biggest
The
challenges.
ones who make the decisions don't really want to appoint us.
I mean, as Zainab said something about, the men journalists being supportive of women. I want to see them be so supportive that they appoint women as editors. That's the kind of support, not the token support where it's like, oh, I'm just going to throw you a small bone. I want them to support and elevate women to a point where women are now leaders. So I work for organizations. I've been, lucky where I work for organizations where they definitely would appoint. I mean, my boss was a woman before I went freelance. She was a woman and she was always pushing me. A lot of people would have seen that as harsh, but she just really was worried that there are a lot of women whose talent will die down, and she did not want that for me. And she was the first person to call me up after Sex for Grades was released. And she said, because I want you to go out there and achieve more. So I have, of course, in the early stages of my career, I had my shows shut down a lot. Anytime I wanted to talk about women specific issues, it was like, oh, this is not, don't worry, we'll give you Wednesdays to talk about women, Mondays to Friday, give me serious stories. That sort of limited like the first years of my career. But I've started to meet more and more editors who would, employ women. I personally, for Document Women, we're all women writers. Our editor is a woman. I will definitely employ women. You people around me, as you start to carve that niche of preaching the gender mainstreaming and gender equality gospel, you start to find that you are in the space where you have like-minded individuals who will definitely employ women.
Okay. I mean, as we wind down, I just want to touch on something which I think everyone is thinking about. And if you haven't thought about it, you need to start worrying about, well, don't worry about it if you hasn't. But we have limited space offline. And we thought with digital technology, we'll be 110% free to say what we wanted, express ourselves. But what is the most disheartening and the most worrying, and especially now because of the pandemic, okay, it was bad before, it's gotten worse, is the kind of online harassment and attacks that we've been getting as women journalists. I mean, the ICFJ UNESCO study, the survey that was done recently, 73% of us actually have experienced some form of online violence or some kind of harassment. And it's the worst. Okay, it's not all of us, but at least 25% have been threatened with beatings or whatever kind of physical violence. Yeah. There's another 18% who've received sexual threats. I mean, that is befuddling. And then the worst is that very few of us are able to complain or report or have done nothing. And because of that, a lot of us are either going through mental trauma in our small corners in our homes or wherever. And those who can afford it are able, and we know psychological counseling services in most of our countries are extremely expensive. So we are surviving by dint of our own whatever and our friends and our networks. I just want to get one quick comment from, I don't know how many of you have experienced this. I know, Kiki, you have. Bernadette, Zainab, I don't know. Maybe you can talk to this. And just one comment from you, Kiki, how do we handle it? How can we handle it? Just one, don't take too long because I want to go to something else on that. I want to hear from Zainab.
Okay, Zainab.
Okay, she's off. You're off. Switch on your mic. You're muted.
Go on, Kiki. I'll go after you. Go on, Kiki.
um we need to be as decisive, because if we admit that the digital space is a simulation of our social environment, it's only natural that the problems that we have here would replicate online, and one of them is GBV. Our numbers are so high when it comes to harassment, but so low when it comes to inclusion and participation, and it's the same thing that happens in real life. So what we can do is these platforms, they have to become moderators and police on behalf of women, because this is a space that 50% of your market is women. So you're not protecting half of your market if you're neglecting, the specific violence that women face online, especially, for a career like journalism that is supposed to speak truth to power. So that means you're silencing press, you're silencing 50% of your market, you're silencing 50% of press. I think that platforms need to be even more decisive about the language with which they use to prevent or fight sexual and gender-based violence. Yeah. A lot of it is generic right now. We don't have a lot of African languages incorporated into these algorithms that fish out harassment. But we're definitely an important part of the women journalists, as African women journalists. So we definitely need to, be decisive about that.
Okay, we can talk about the algorithms and what else we need to do on our digital spaces and how to keep ourselves safe. And I think that's a conversation for another day. Right now, I want to say thank you very much to all of you, Bernadette, Zainab, Kiki. I want to introduce Sharon, who is the incoming president. Actually, she's already, you are taking over, of ICFJ. Thank you very much for giving us time to have this conversation. Sharon?
Oh, thanks, Catherine, and thank you all. That was a very, very lively, spirited discussion, and one that is an important one, right? It was a combination of optimism and pessimism, I think, in that conversation that you kind of started us out with, Catherine. I like to think hopefully we found some optimism here too. Bernadette, Kiki, Zainab, you're doing amazing work. We're so pleased to have you as the Michael Elliott Award winners. I think you are carrying on that legacy of being an inspiration, of being amazing storytellers. And as you all were discussing, we really do hope that this award helps you to amplify, gives you a bigger platform, and then it helps you do your jobs and your work even more, and engage and reach audiences even at greater levels. So thank you all for your fantastic work. And just before we wrap up too, a big, obviously enormous thanks to Emma Oxford, Mike's widow, who's done so much for his legacy. We're honored to be the torchbearers of this award. I really think it's such an important endeavor, and I'm happy to carry another torch from Joyce going forward. And Emma, as you said so beautifully in the beginning, Joyce has just been the powerhouse behind this, working with you and with One and The Economist and others, and she has enormous shoes to fill, and I'm going to do my very best to fill them at least a little bit, and this will be an important part of my work going forward as well. So thanks everyone for joining us. We really appreciate it. Have a wonderful evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are, and we will see you soon.